exam anxiety.
When it sets in, it cripples the flip out of us, and the mental paralysis sets in, and we have those constantly ruminating thoughts that are circling our brain like Ferris wheel. We're constantly plagued by what can happen, what we've read, what will be the result, and all of these thoughts. So, what if I tell you that if you understand your anxiety from a more scientific perspective, you can actually help yourself combat your own anxiety. So, hi, this is Dr. Chindray, and welcome to my channel, The Healing Neuron. So, before everything, I'd like to say that if you think this is a video that has helped you, do leave a like and a comment and share it with your peers, because that activates the reward center in my brain and gets me more dopamine to get more ideas and make more videos like this. So, anyway, let's get back to our topic. We've all heard that anxiety is a normal phenomenon, and exams just precipitate more anxiety and they heighten that feeling of anxiety for us. But knowing this isn't really helping you right now. You're still anxious and you still need help. That is why you have entered the la la land of YouTube to find a way out. Don't worry, I've done it too, so it's okay. Now, first, take 2 deep breaths. Breathe in and breathe out. Do this twice. And while you do that, understand one thing. Right now, at this present moment, there is nothing that can hurt you. No exam is hurting you at this present moment. When we're anxious, we're mostly thinking about a future event. We're so constantly plagued by the thoughts of the future. We forget one thing: it's in the future. At this particular moment, we're still safe. Do you feel a tiny bit better? Do you feel teensy bit better? Now, let's try to organize your anxious thoughts. I want you to pause this video and write down the dominant anxious thoughts in your brain that are crippling you from making further progress. So, I hope you've written down all your anxious dominant thoughts. And now, as we go ahead in this video, I think most of the thoughts in your list are actually cognitive distortions. What are cognitive distortions? Cognitive distortions are thought patterns that cause people to view reality in a very inaccurate, usually negative way. They're habitual errors in thinking. So, when you're experiencing a cognitive distortion, the way you interpret things is actually very negatively biased. Now, most people experience cognitive distortion from time to time, and that is how it's reinforced often. And this increases the anxiety, it deepens depression, and also causes difficulties in relationships and might lead to a lot of other complications. And the thing is that cognitive distortions aren't healthy and they're not rational. So, we really need to understand these thoughts. We really need to point out our thoughts when we're having a cognitive distortion, so that we understand that this is not exactly the truth. Whatever I'm thinking, it's not the truth. It is just a way my brain has forced itself into think. So let's look at the different kinds of cognitive distortions one by one, and you can mark them down in your list if it matches to a cognitive distortion. So next time when you have the same similar thought, you'd know that no, this is not the truth. This is just a cognitive distortion. Let's go. So the first is polarized thinking. We also call it the all or none, the black and white thinking. These distortions generally happen when people tend to think in extremes. Like, you're convinced that you're either gonna succeed or you're gonna fail. You either people in your life are the best or they're devils. Or, when you think this way, when there's no in between in your thinking, you're probably having a cognitive distortion. So in case of your exams, you're like, I'm either going to come first or I'm going to fail. There is no in between for you. You either want to top the exam or you think you're going to fail. So if you don't top the exam, everything else for you is actually failing. So that is a kind of cognitive distortion, which is called polarized thinking. Now, this kind of distortion is very unrealistic, right? Because there is always a gray area. There is no black and white. It's very unhelpful because most of the time, reality actually exists between those two extremes. So, this is not a healthy cognitive distortion. Actually, no cognitive distortion is actually that healthy. So if you feel you're actually thinking that way, you can mark this particular cognitive distortion next to the thought that you've written down. So next time you think that way, you'd know that, oh no, I'm actually polarizing. This is not the truth. So the second is overgeneralization. When people overgeneralize, they reach a conclusion about one event and then indirectly or incorrectly apply that conclusion across everything. For example, if you've given the NEET PG exam once and you've not done so well, you tend to overgeneralize and think that I'm hopeless at this exam. I am probably not going to do well in the next exam as well because I have failed or gotten a low score in the previous one, which is not true, which is not correct. And we have a negative experience in one thing and we tend to have a belief that we're just not good at the whole thing at all. So this has been usually associated with PTSD and other anxiety disorders. So if you feel any of your thoughts are along the lines of this particular cognitive distortion, write it down in your notebook. So the next time you have that thought, you know that this is not true. This is just me overgeneralizing. Third is catastrophizing. Now, this is a distorted type of thinking in which when people are faced with an adverse event or any unknown event, they automatically assume the worst. So when people catastrophize, any ordinary worries can quickly escalate. For example, during your exam, you see a question that you have never read before, and immediately your brain thinks, this exam is doomed, I'm going to fail this exam, I can't do this exam, I can't write further, and you get crippled and you tend to destroy or tend to really ruin an exam that would have been good for you. But that particular thinking, that particular catastrophizing actually led you to ruin your own exam. This has happened with me as well, so I really relate to this particular cognitive distortion. But in general, for example, you've woken up late while prepping for your exam, and for you, since you've woken up late, you're like, okay, aaj ka din to gaya. Today's day is it's gone. There's nothing that can be done about this day because I've woken up late. I am already behind schedule, and everything that can go wrong is going wrong today. So we're catastrophizing. It's just an ordinary thing. You've just woken up late. You probably woken up late by 3-4 hours. You still have the whole day, right? So it's an ordinary worry that has escalated really, really quickly and has kind of ruined anything better you could have done in the process. So if you feel that this is one of the cognitive distortions you're facing, write it down next to that particular thought. So that I'm repeating it again, so that it is reinforced that whenever you feel these kind of thoughts, please remember that they are forms of cognitive distortions, and this is just your brain playing tricks with you. This is your brain trying to adapt itself because it does not like that uncomfortable situation. So you just tell yourself, no, this is just a cognitive distortion, and you continue with your day, you continue with your exam in the same way that you would have. So the next one is personalization, and I think a lot of people who are preparing for exams from home or with parents, or those from the COVID times have been staying with parents, might relate to this or might not, but I feel like this is something that people who have been staying with parents for a long time and who are not used to staying with parents because of staying in college or something like that might experience. So this cognitive distortion is called personalization, and this is where we take things personally when they're not even connected to us at all. And you might be engaging in personalization when you blame yourself for everything that is happening or things that are beyond your control, but you're still blaming yourself for it, or you're feeling guilty for it. So an example is where your parents or friends have said something and you feel guilty for that. You feel like it's all your fault. You feel like you're connected to this somehow. It's all because of you, when in reality it is actually not. You feel like your parents are disappointed in you because you've not performed in the exam the way you should have, which is not actually true. Maybe it's not true at all. Your parents still love you, but you feel that way. It is something that is there in your brain. So if you feel this is a thought that you've been having recurrently, just know that this is actually a cognitive distortion. So the next is mind reading, where people assume you know what others are thinking. They're resorting to mind reading. it can be hard to distinguish between mind reading and empathy, where empathy is also the ability to perceive and understand what others are feeling. Now, to tell the difference between the two, it's helpful to consider all the evidence and not just the evidence that confirms your suspicions and beliefs. Feeling that way. If you feel that your parents come in your room when you're studying and you feel that you can read their mind, that they're disappointed in you, you might be resorting to mind reading and not actually empathy. Do think about it. Cognitive distortion is mental filtering, where we tend to ignore the positives and focus exclusively on the negatives. Now, if we're interpreting circumstances using a negative mental filter, it is not only inaccurate but it can heighten your anxiety or depression symptoms. Research has usually found that if we have a negative perspective of ourselves and our future, it can cause feelings of hopelessness. Now, these thoughts may become extreme enough or even trigger suicidal thoughts. Now, the last cognitive distortion I have for you is labeling. In labeling, we tend to reduce ourselves to a single term, or we label ourselves with usually a negative term, like I'm a failure, I am negligent, I am going to be defeated, I'm frustrated, I neglect everything, I'm not intelligent, I'm just dumb. This is labeling. If you think that you do this a lot, you might actually be experiencing a cognitive distortion. So once again, take that notebook, take that paper, and write down all of the cognitive distortions that you think you might be facing, along with the particular thought that you have in your head. Now, I'll tell you why that is important, because this is an exercise that you have to do next time you feel that way. And now for the fun part. You've written down your troublesome thoughts here. You've written down what cognitive distortion they can be. I want you to take this piece of paper and stick it right in front of your eye line wherever you study. And next time when you're studying, or when you're following a Pomodoro, whichever way you're studying, you don't want these thoughts to bother you, but they still will because they're thoughts. So what you can do is take a separate notebook, write down that particular thought. Write down whatever thought you're having. For example, oh, mom asked me to buy eggs. Just write it down. Or, I'm a failure, I can't do this. Write it down. And tell your brain that you're going to acknowledge these thoughts after your Pomodoro or after your period of studying. When you take your break, look at that notebook and see if are you facing any cognitive distortion. Look at that paper in front of you. See if it's matching. If it's not, that's a new cognitive distortion for you. Write it down there. If it is, make a tick mark, or whatever you want to do. Make a tick mark or put a line in front of it so that you know next time. Your brain knows this is the thought pattern it is following. Your brain just wants its thoughts to be acknowledged. So in this way, you're acknowledging your brain's thoughts. You are telling your brain a rational explanation of the thoughts. And in a way, this whole process might have just helped your anxiety. Let me know in the comments if this process really helped you. And if it does not, please let me know too, because I appreciate constructive criticism as well. Not hate comments, but yeah, constructive criticism. And I'd see you in the next video. And yeah, so that's it for this video. And I'll see you next time.